The honourable member from Parkdale-High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to speak on this motion on income inequality. I'll be splitting my time with my colleague, the honourable member from Hochelaga. Inequality is another inconvenient truth of our era, and its growth is every bit as unsustainable for our communities, our businesses, and our economy as climate change. If we can't reduce it, it will hobble growth and opportunity for the next generation. We can't afford to misuse our economic strengths in this way. Canada is among the most fortunate of nations. We're the 10th largest economy in the world. We have the resources, natural, economic, and financial, to create the kind of society that we want. We can afford to share our prosperity. The good news is, Mr. Speaker, that shared prosperity leads to more prosperity. Greater equality is not a trade-off, but an investment in our future. Income inequality remains one of the most serious challenges our country faces today and has been on the rise in Canada for the past 20 years. We in the NDP welcome all efforts to reduce, not accelerate, income inequality. We're glad that the Liberals are finally on board, and we appreciate the suggestions in this motion. However, what needs to be done is not just embroidering the cloth, but repairing the fraying fabric of our society. Sadly, the Liberals presided over increased income inequality while they were in power during the 1990s and 2000s, but they have consistently supported conservative budgets that have led us down the wrong path. We welcome this opportunity to spend today debating this motion. It's an important issue that gets far too little attention in this House and from this government. Our former colleague, Tony Martin, has made reducing inequality his life's work, including in this House. And we miss him. Quelques faits.
A few facts. Salaries for most Canadians have been in a stagnation mode for several years. Average income for Canadians has only increased by 5.5% over a 33-year period. According to the Conference Board of Canada, income inequality is growing faster in Canada than in the U.S.
C grade for income inequality and ranked us 12th out of 17 peer countries. And the OECD has noted that Canada's level of inequality is now above the OECD average. Much of the increase in inequality is being driven by income gains for the top 1%. The richest 1% of Canadians saw their share of total income increase from 8.1% in 1980 to 13.3% in 2007. The richest 1% in Canada took home almost 1/3 of all growth in incomes between 1998 and 2007, at the expense and to the detriment of other income groups. At the same time, unemployment and economic growth are highly divergent across this country. Over 43% of unemployed Canadians live in Ontario alone. This increase in inequality has serious implications for Canadian families. Household debt has reached record highs, suppressing demand and hindering economic growth. Lars Ostberg at Dalhousie University argues that, and I quote, over the 1981 to 2006 period, the life experience of most Canadian families changed. The new normal has been that entering cohorts of young workers earned less in real terms than their parents' generation did at a comparable age, end quote. Our young people are also facing high unemployment. The unemployment rate for people aged 15 to 24 is more than double the national average at 14.8%. What this means, Mr. Speaker, is that there are 400,000 youth in Canada who are looking for work and can't find it. Women, Aboriginal people, racialized communities, and recent immigrants also suffer from disproportionate poverty relative to other Canadians, and such inequality has serious societal consequences. A 2009 groundbreaking book on inequality by British scholars Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett empirically demonstrates that inequality, more than GNP, has a significant impact on a range of social indicators, including health outcomes such as average life expectancy, and other measures of human development such as rates of literacy, teenage pregnancy, or incarceration. This is not the legacy that we should be leaving to the next generation. But rather than taking action to correct these imbalances, the government has chosen to pursue an austerity agenda that has only exacerbated them. First thing we should do, support Canada's middle class. Don't attack it. Don't stand idly by when giant corporations force workers to take a half pay cut half their pay, or lose their jobs, as in the case at Caterpillar. Don't intervene in private sector collective bargaining to force lower wages than even the employer was prepared to offer at the bargaining table, such as at Canada Post and Air Canada. And don't happily ship value-added jobs out of the country to the US or China by focusing on exports of bitumen rather than upgrading resources right here at home in Canada. Let's raise the floor, not lower it, by increasing the low-wage skills sector of the economy with temporary foreign workers. And let's instead sanction employers who pay them less than Canadians for doing the same work. In an era of increasing inequality, the government's attack on OAS, GIS, and employment insurance, along with reckless cuts to the services Canadians rely on, is only adding to the problem. When Liberal Conservative governments plundered the EI fund of billions of dollars and then told Canadians who were unemployed that they had to accept lower benefits, that was simply unacceptable. This government continues to promote a "you must accept less" doctrine for the vast majority, but a "sky's the limit" approach for the high rollers. Avant le milieu des années
Before the mid-1990s, the Canadian tax system was as effective as that of Nordic countries. To stabilize inequality, it balanced out market inequalities. But the fact relating to redistribution have worsened. The OECD has noted that we are simply not countering the inequality that exists in incomes. Conservatives seem to support an approach that is focused on economic benefits, saying that an increase in incomes for the wealthiest in society will be good for everyone eventually. But tax breaks for big companies and for the wealthiest in Canada has resulted in growing inequality and an increase in unemployment rather. Income inequality is a serious problem with serious consequences. Canadians want us to act. Inequality is the first and foremost concern of Canadians, according to a poll carried out by ECOS.
Reduce inequality, it will hobble growth and opportunity for the next generation. Instead of tilting the playing field increasingly to the advantage of the most powerful and affluent in our society, we need a government that takes a first do-no-harm approach. So rather than eliminating the deficit even faster than promised so that they can introduce new tax cuts that will benefit Canada's most affluent households, let's invest in the services and programs Canadians want and need right now. We need strong, balanced job creation right across Canada and a living wage, including for all contracts and procurements with the federal government. Sadly, in Canada, we've seen weak leadership that's turned its back on the daily struggles of most Canadians. But we can change that. Canadians can count on New Democrats to work for a future where Canada is prosperous for all and where no one is left behind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member from Peterborough.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciated the comments from the member. I think this member is very genuine in her desire to have a very positive impact on the lives of Canadians. But specifically, I think that, it's one thing to talk kind of in platitudes about how we would achieve these things or what we'd like to see. But I think we need to see some ironclad measures put on the table as to how she would seek to achieve the very lofty goals that she has set. I think we'd all like to see higher wages in Canada. I think we'd all like to see Canadians earning more and doing better and in a stronger personal financial situation. But we also have the reality of the global financial difficulties that we're witnessing. I'd just like to see some concrete measures put on the table. What would she and her party propose concretely to achieve what she has suggested?
The honourable member from Parkdale-High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for his question. You know, as I said very clearly in my speech, the first basic tenet should be do no harm. So rather than the serious cuts that this government has already made that are impacting Canadians across the country, cutting services, taking people who currently are getting more benefits to a position of reduced or in some cases no EI benefits, let's stop doing that. Let's continue to invest in the services and programs that Canadians want and need. And yes, of course, we have to deal with reducing the deficit, but we don't need to be as aggressive and accelerate even the government's own measures and their own time frames for deficit reduction. Because what we're seeing is that is increasing inequality, and ultimately, if they use those gains to create new tax measures that benefit only the people at the top, it will increase inequality.
Questions and comments? The honourable member from Sydney, Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the famous announcements the Conservatives made in the spring, on the clawbacks to the EI recipients, we've seen many cases all through the summer and early fall. But what I'm seeing right now is a lot of seasonal employers. And not just seasonal employers, it could be hospitals, schools, people with seasonal help, where they're finding it's going to be very difficult to get these employees that are part-time to come in the winter hours for one day to come in. And with the clawback is so, it's not only detriment to these poorer people, but it's going to be detriment to these industries and businesses that cannot get the people to come in for that one day. And what's going to happen next spring when these businesses are in jeopardy? So my question is to the member from Parkdale-High Park is, does she really believe, and she's strongly going to vote against this clawback measurement that's in the EI, and if she can explain how it's hurting the businesses or institutions in her riding?
The honourable member for Parkdale-High Park.
I thank the member for his question, and I know that in his riding and in his region of the country, certainly there are many seasonal workers who are seriously affected by these changes. And these changes disproportionately hurt those at the lower end of the income scale. And of course, there are regions of Canada where there are more seasonal workers, and therefore those regions are disproportionately affected. But I will say, and he asked me directly, in my riding in Parkdale-High Park, where we also have people who work seasonally in the tourist industry, people who work in the arts and cultural sector who don't get full-time, full-year work, and they too are disproportionately negatively affected by these changes. So the clawback seriously hurts far too many Canadians, especially those who can afford at least those at the lowest end of the income scale.
Questions and comments? The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay. Very quickly, there's less than a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mark Carney, President of the Bank of Canada, points out there's $580 billion of what he calls dead money sitting in the bank accounts of corporate Canada because there's no incentive for them to move that back into the economy. The question we have to ask is the failure of this government to set up clear drivers to ensure investment and ensure job training. And I ask my honourable colleague, given the fact that they've had just across-the-board tax cuts year after year with no planned investment of how that would be redirected into the economy, what she feels this $580 billion in dead money that's sitting in bank accounts could actually do to kickstart the economy at this time.
The honourable member from Parkdale-High Park. You're almost out of time.
Well, I thank the member from Timmins, James Bay, for his question. And, you know, if companies feel economic insecurity, they're not going to be investing. But it just shows the failure of the approach of this government and the previous Liberal government to not tie any tax reductions to specific job creation, to innovation, to economic stimulus, and we're feeling the impact of that now. It's creating a sluggish economy. Unemployment remains high, and we know we can do much better with measures that are tied to job creation. That's what an NDP government would do.